Miss Monteiro texted a sister that he threw me on the ground and pulled my hair and strangled me. My phone is at 4%, and if I die, it was Greg.
A grim and chilling turn in the disappearance of 18-year-old Kylee Monteiro. Her boyfriend, 22-year-old Gregory Groom, has been arrested and charged with her murder after police say they made a gruesome discovery on his property. His first court appearance today revealed shocking details that authorities say led up to her death, and we are going to break it down with insight from a retired detective commander right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Unfortunately, we have a grim update in a case that we've been following here on Sidebar. The disappearance of 18-year-old Kylee Monteiro. Investigators say that human remains consistent with Kylee's have been recovered, and they were found on the property of her boyfriend, 22-year-old Gregory Groom. We've talked about him before. Groom has been arrested, appeared before a Taunton District Court judge earlier today. He is facing multiple serious charges. Prosecutors say he also provided details to police about Kylee's death. That's the allegation. We're going to get into those details in a little bit. But this tragic and sad development comes after nearly 2 weeks of intensive searches across Rehoboth, a small town in Bristol County, Massachusetts, about 50 miles from Boston. Now, the search efforts involved drones, cadaver dogs, dive teams, helicopters. This was all after Kylee was last seen on August 7th at Groom's home on County Street. So I'm going to walk you through her disappearance, what led up to this update. We go back to August 6th. According to Kylee's family, she reportedly had some sort of altercation with Groom at his home. And at the time, there were a few details that were known about the nature of this dispute. But I will tell you, today's arraignment revealed more serious and deeply troubling information. And again, we're going to get to all of that in a little bit. But the incident was serious enough to raise immediate concern among her family. By August 11th, Kylie's sister, Kylee Monteiro, made a public plea on Facebook, signaling potential domestic issues in this relationship. In that post, she wrote, "There were some domestic issues involved. She is pregnant, and it's highly unlike her to cut all contact from social media and family." Kylie's other sister, Faith, said she called her after this altercation, telling her she was afraid for her life. Faith offered to pick her up, but Kylee apparently declined. And maybe, most hauntingly, she reportedly sent a message to a friend that read, and this is paraphrased, "I don't feel safe right now. Something's not right." Well, after that message, Kylee went completely silent. The next day, August 7th, police say it was actually Groom who called to report Kylee missing. August 8th, when her family still hadn't heard from Kylee, that's when alarm bells went off. The teen had been very active on social media, particularly TikTok. And eerily, her last post was on August 6th, a photo caption in abbreviated form, "I don't care what people think about me." For more than a week, Rehoboth Police and the Massachusetts State Police conducted tireless searches for her, again, deploying canine units, drones, dive teams. Her family and friends, they took to social media to spread awareness. They shared photos from her prom and graduation. The recent Attleboro High School graduate had just celebrated receiving her diploma. She was roughly 11 weeks pregnant. And they also shared details of what was her apparent difficult past. After her mother passed away, Kylee moved in with her aunt and uncle. She lived there until meeting Groom in March when she became pregnant. The couple separated shortly after, but maintained what has been seen or reported, this on-again, off-again relationship. And Kylee was then apparently living in a shelter for pregnant women. But then authorities returned to Groom's home with a search warrant, and a backhoe was brought in as crews began digging behind the property. By late in the day, officials confirmed that human remains consistent with Kylee's had been discovered. That evening, Rehoboth Police Chief Louis Tabaco and investigators addressed the just tragic development at a press conference.
18-year-old Kylee Monteiro was reported missing by the defendant, Gregory Groom, on Thursday, August 7th of this year. The two had been in a dating relationship. She was last reported seen at 107 County Street in Rehoboth, which is the residence of Gregory Groom. It is also learned that Kylee Monteiro was approximately 11 weeks pregnant. Extensive searches were conducted by various units of the Massachusetts State Police. Based on information obtained during the investigation into Kylee Monteiro's disappearance, police obtained a search warrant for the property at 107 County Street in Rehoboth that was executed starting this afternoon. As a result of the search of the property, human remains consistent with those of Kylee Monteiro have been recovered. We await confirmation from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. The defendant was charged earlier today with assault and battery on a pregnant person, intimidation of a witness, and domestic assault and battery for an alleged incident that occurred on August 6th.
According to court documents, Groom is charged with murder, assault and battery on a pregnant victim, aggravated intimidation of a witness, juror, police, or court official, and assault and battery on a family or household member. Groom made his first court appearance earlier today where he was arraigned, and we're going to get more into that in a minute. But first, to help us get into some key insights into this investigation, I want to bring on a special guest, Will Svilar, retired detective commander from the Chicago Police Department. Will, thank you so much for coming on. This is a really, really sad development. From your experience, what are the challenges for investigators? What do they face when searching for a missing person on private property, especially when you're dealing with human remains being involved?
Well, it's a terrible story. It's a terrible story with your updates today with the charges being announced. It's a horrible story. When you're looking for a missing person, there are a lot of different factors that are involved. In this case, it seemed like from the beginning they had a general idea that she may have been with Groom, based on the comment she made or the text she sent to her friends. I think they had a general idea of where she was last. Now, where she was currently, it took them a little while to get to. It looks like they brought it out in an interview.
And the drones, the cadaver dogs, the dive teams, the backhoes, is that typical in an investigation like this? How extensive is that?
It's pretty extensive. But you're also dealing with a large property. I think it was like 25 acres of property that they were dealing with. So if you have whatever resource you have, you use it. Especially you got an 18-year-old who's pregnant, obviously high risk, living in a shelter, not the best support system that you could think of. You got to get everything you can out there. And it sounds like they did. It sounds like they had every resource, state and local, to try to find her.
Now, if you've been following us, you know that we have been all on top of this story. And the reason we can do that, the reason we can provide you updates and continue to follow what's happening is because of the amazing support that we get from our sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. This is America's largest injury law firm. This is a firm with over 1,000 attorneys. You know why they have so many? Because they win a lot. They have recovered over $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. In fact, in the past few months, a client in Florida received $12 million after the insurance company offered just $350,000. Out in Pennsylvania, a client was awarded $26 million. That is 40 times the insurer's $650,000 offer. Another client in Pennsylvania received $29 million after being offered only $500,000. And even if you think your case isn't worth millions of dollars, why not start a claim and fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so simple. You can start a claim from your phone in just 8 clicks. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar by clicking the link below or scanning the QR code on screen. Assuming these allegations are true, what are the warning signs that family, friends, what should they pay attention to when a loved one may be in a possibly dangerous relationship?
Well, a couple of things they have to pay attention to is one, the fact that she became pregnant. That's not really a red flag, but if you're in a situation where the relationship's not stable or you're two very young people, the pregnancy, you might want to take a better look at or keep a better eye on the girl who's pregnant, especially when she's 18 years old. She's in a relationship with a man who may or may not want the pregnancy. And there may probably have been some kind of mentioning of domestic violence in the past to her friends. So there's a lot of red flags. Obviously, physical condition. If you see any kind of bruises or scrapes, you got to pay attention to that. But I think the key factor in this one's going to be the pregnancy.
Yeah, and I thought that just the social media posts are very interesting, right? So the lack of social media activity would indicate something was wrong. But there was that eerie apparent social media post from Kylee as well. Does it give you an insight into what may be going on with someone? Do social media help in that way? You know, they talk so many times about how you can't really believe anything on social media. People put one image out there, but truth be told, it can really help with investigations, particularly missing persons investigations, right?
Oh, massive. It helps massively. And we had a whole unit that was a social media unit that would go into the people's social media, try to find out the history of their posts. If you get someone that posts every half an hour, or someone that posts at least once a day, and then all of a sudden they stop posting completely with no explanation, that's a red flag. Especially, you know, in this generation, everybody's on a phone. I'm on a phone myself all the time. So having these units for social media, they're huge. It's a vital piece of investigative technique now.
Let's get a little bit more into what came from Groom's arraignment, okay? And then we're going to break it all down. So Groom appeared in the Taunton County District Court, and this is where he was read his charges.
Gregory Groom. On docket 251816, on or about the date of August 6, 2025, in the town of Rehoboth, been charged with murder, assault and battery on a pregnant victim, aggravated intimidation of a witness.
Now, a public defender was appointed to represent him, and a not guilty plea was entered on his behalf. But prosecutors immediately requested that Groom be held without bail, and they outlined what is a troubling timeline of events. Take a listen.
This incident stems from the recovery of a body last evening. The incident started on August 8th when this defendant, Gregory Groom, contacted the Rehoboth Police Department to indicate that his ex-girlfriend, identified as 18-year-old Kylee Monteiro, was missing. Mr. Groom reported that Miss Monteiro was at his house, that she was looking for a place to stay. They got into an argument, and that she ultimately left his residence walking down the driveway, and she hadn't been seen or heard from since. Miss Monteiro was known to be very active on social media, and he hadn't heard from her, neither had her friends or family, on any social media in the following days.
Investigators say they then combed through her social media activity. They interviewed Groom, they interviewed Kylie's family members, and this uncovered a more alleged troubling picture.
Mr. Groom reported that Miss Monteiro was approximately 11 weeks pregnant, and she told him that he was the father of the baby, that on August 6th, she had left a residential program and took a rideshare to his house. She was looking to stay with him, and an argument ensued about whether or not he would allow her to stay on his property. When the police began to question him and other family members, they learned from Miss Monteiro's sister that on August 6th, when she had arrived at his house, that there was an altercation between Mr. Groom and Miss Monteiro. Miss Monteiro texted a sister that he threw me on the ground and pulled my hair and strangled me. My phone is at 4%, and if I die, it was Greg. Family members then tried to communicate with Miss Monteiro and get her to a place of safety, and she didn't respond right away. Ultimately, there was a response from her device that indicated she was attempting to continue to stay at Mr. Groom's residence.
And the investigation took a very dark turn when Groom was brought in for questioning.
During that interview, he admitted that on August 6th, he had gotten into an altercation with Miss Monteiro where he pushed her, she fell backwards, and she hit her head. When she attempted to contact an individual, Mr. Groom admitted that he knocked her cell phone out of her hands, at which time he was going to be charged with the 3 offenses for assault and battery on domestic assault and battery on a pregnant person, and for intimidation of a witness. When investigators continued to press Mr. Groom on the whereabouts of Miss Monteiro, they informed him that they had applied for and were granted a search warrant for an extensive search of 107 County Street. That included not only cadaver dogs, but excavators, chemists from the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, and other investigators, and they informed Mr. Groom that they were prepared to search the property and dig if necessary. Mr. Groom then paused He was given an opportunity to tell the police where Miss Montero's body was located, either by being taken to his property and pointing it out, or drawing a map, or telling the officers where her body was located, as they believed Miss Monteiro was dead. Mr. Groom ultimately drew a rudimentary map indicating that he got into an argument behind a shed on the property where he was known to stay and where Miss Monteiro stayed, that during that altercation, Mr. Groom admitted that he stabbed Miss Monteiro twice in the neck and once in the chest. The stab wound to the chest actually broke the blade of the knife off. He used a kitchen knife to commit the stabbing, and based on that stabbing, Miss Monteiro was deceased. Mr. Groom indicated to police that he then spent several hours digging a hole in the woods, approximately 20 yards from where he killed Miss Monteiro, and through the night after he dug, when the sun came up, he then pushed her body into the hole and covered it up. He drew on the map the approximate location of Miss Monteiro's remains. Officers who were conducting the search warrant then went to the shed. They noticed there was a large pile of brush right next to the shed. That was what Mr. Groom used to cover up the site of the murder, to cover up blood that was ultimately recovered, and physical evidence was recovered from the scene where the police alleged the stabbing occurred. About 20 yards away in the woods, there was another large pile of brush with feet upon feet of trees, cut down trees that were piled up. Underneath that pile, the police located a rectangular hole that appeared that had been recently disturbed dirt. When the police ultimately called in medical examiners to uncover that hole, a body consistent with Kylee Monteiro was discovered approximately 5 feet underground. Miss Monteiro's remains were recovered last evening, and her body is at the office of the chief medical examiner undergoing identification process and undergoing an autopsy.
Okay, Will, from your experience, how common is it for a suspect to report a missing person and then later be implicated in their death, right? Because a lot of people would say, well, wait a minute, if they were responsible, why on earth would they alert authorities?
Very common. As a matter of fact, in most cases that I've dealt with, the person that reports this person missing, if they turn up injured or dead, is the one that did it. And when you get into some of these initial investigations after someone's reported missing, usually the person that provides the most information and tries to be most helpful is a person you should be looking at, especially in a domestic situation.
And how significant was it that he apparently drew a map for investigators? How does that impact building the case? And just his statements overall, or his alleged statements overall, or, I mean, if you're a prosecutor, this is what you're looking for. If you're an investigator, this is what you're looking for. But what did you make of what he apparently said?
I mean, the drawing of the map, when you get into defense, when you start to make a defense into something like that, or even when you're doing questioning in an interview, you want the person you're questioning to give you details that you don't have. You don't want to feed them details that you have and have them to agree with it. You want them to give you details you don't have. Drawing of a map leading to a body, I don't think you get much better evidence than that.
And the details about the stabbing, the attempt to conceal the body, this, obviously investigators have to confirm a lot of these details, but if you're talking about trying to elicit that information, what is the difficulty in trying to elicit that information from a suspect, and making sure that no rights are violated, that it can be used in a court of law, but also you wonder why a suspect would allegedly reveal this information.
In a lot of cases, in cases that I've worked, if you have somebody that doesn't ask for a lawyer immediately, there's a chance they want to tell you something. And as the more you question someone, if they keep talking to you, they want to say something to you. And you have to try to give them an out. And what I mean by that is I'm saying you have to show, or you have to say, hey, listen, I know what happened, but you got to tell me why this happened so you don't look like a monster or an animal. You've got to give your side of the story. A lot of times that technique will work because a cold-blooded murderer is going to lawyer up and say nothing. Someone who may have had something happen out of sudden and intense passion is going to want to tell you, yeah, listen, I did this, but here are the factors, or here's what happened that led to it.
Yeah, how do investigators confirm things? How do they confirm that, like, for example, the sequence of events when you have an apparent combination of physical assault, a weapon, attempts to cover up the crime? Because timeline matters. Sequence of events matters.
Timeline's everything. And when we talked about social media posting, we talk about cell phones, tracking of a cell phone, last whereabouts, last contact she makes with her family when she leaves the residential home. All of that stuff folds into a timeline. And the timeline is crucial, especially when you're going to get into at the forensics, the postmortem, time of death, cause and manner of death, and you kind of pair that with his statements, and all of it has to follow in a timeline for it to make sense and to be provable, to make it a good case, a good prosecutable case.
What is this alleged, murder, and what is the location of where the remains were found? What does that tell you about what may have happened here? I always wonder sometimes when we have unexplained cases and you think about the discovery of a body, who had the opportunity and the means and the resources to transport a body in a particular location. This is such a specific area. It obviously, the case is, I wouldn't want to defend him. I mean, it's really, really tough. It just becomes a question about what does this level of attack and what does where the remains were found and what condition they were in, what does that tell you?
Well, it's basically going to tell the story. It's going to say, obviously, he took us to the body, so he put it there. That's what you're going to have to prove. Secondary, when you're talking about defending somebody, you're right. I wouldn't want to defend this person either. So what you're going to have to do, in my opinion, in this case, is you're going to have to say it's sudden and intense passion, something that he didn't mean to happen, and you're going to try to plead this down off of first-degree murder based on his cooperation, based on the fact that the only defense you can come up with is sudden and intense passion. I accidentally did this, I lost my mind, or whatever. But, I mean, as a prosecutor, they don't get much better than this. And as an investigator, especially when you get a statement that can be corroborated by the physical evidence, it's a horrible situation, but it's a good case. If that makes any sense.
I always wonder, in your perspective, if you can work out some sort of plea deal where you avoid a trial. Is that something, obviously from the victim's case, I talk about this so many times in sexual abuse cases, if you can spare the victims from having to go on the stand and recount what happened, I mean, that's a goal. If you can spare a jury from grotesque autopsy photos and really disturbing content, obviously I think there's an advantage there. It saves time and expense of a trial. But from an investigative point of view, you put in the work, you maybe would have an opportunity to explain to a jury or judge what the investigation revealed, what the evidence revealed. If this doesn't make it to trial and there is a plea deal, and I'm not sure that that's the case and what it would be here, how does law enforcement typically look at that?
In a case like this, when you talk about plea deals on a murder, obviously the person who's murdered can't have any input on that. Usually you go to the family. Prosecutors will go to the family. Not always, but they'll go to the family and see if that's something, hey, you want to be spared this? Here's the deal. But the deal's got to make sense. It can't be 10 years. You know what I mean? There's no justice in that. So I don't like plea deals. In cases like this, I wouldn't take a plea. I would want a jury to hear this.
Yeah.
Because it's gruesome, and this guy should never see the light of day again if he's in fact guilty. But sometimes they do make sense. If you do, like you said, spare the family the details, spare everybody the details, and get rid of a long, drawn-out trial if that's what it is. But in my opinion, it's very important that the family has to be on board with any deal before it's given, and the judge doesn't have to accept it either.
No, of course. And I'm not even sure what one would look like here, but talking about the family for a second. So Kylie's family, they had been clinging to hope, that she was alive, that she'd be found, that she'd be okay. Now they're facing this reality. And her sister Kitty shared the following post on Facebook. I'd just like to give a shout out once again to Faith, the Rehoboth Police, and Massachusetts State Police for their diligence, dedication, and nonstop hard work in resolving this case. I know this is not the ending we all wanted, but this is closure for us, and this gives Kylie the opportunity to rest in peace with her mom and her baby. Without you guys, she might not have found peace for years, and that's something that very few people get in cases like these. I think it's a good time to remind everyone to check in regularly with people, tell them you love them every chance you get, take photos every single day, and don't ever forget that people love you, so many people. Now, a GoFundMe has been set up to help her family with the funeral costs. And the family wrote, "Thank you all for your help in spreading awareness and for all the support our family has received so far. This is closure, and we are so thankful for everyone's help in getting there. Obviously, there will be court proceedings, but we are taking this one step at a time." And her sister Faith also announced a candlelight vigil will be held in her honor on Saturday, August 23rd. As for Gregory Groom, he remains in custody as the investigation continues. More details are expected at an upcoming hearing scheduled for September 10th. But Will, you think about this. If there wasn't such a quick discovery of her remains, let me think about it like this. You have those remains in that specific location. Is there a possibility that they wouldn't have been discovered? And if they were discovered at a later date, could they have been in a state where you wouldn't have been able to say they are Kylie's or consistent with Kylee?
Well, you could probably identify her, regardless of when you find her, based on DNA, familial DNA. But the condition of the remains, and without getting too graphic, over time, with decomposition, with insect involvement, over time you can lose valuable evidence. Now, I believe I read that he said he broke the blade off inside of her. That's not going anywhere. That would be there regardless. But you can absolutely lose physical evidence as time goes by. It was like we talked about this earlier. It was huge that he brought investigators to the grave, because it's 20 yards away from where all of it happened. Weather comes in, you lose a ton of physical evidence because of the weather, the rain, or whatever, can wash away all your blood evidence. So the time is crucial. The further you go out, the more physical evidence you're going to lose. So the time frame in this was crucial. And what a wonderful, heartfelt statement the sister put out on that. Just a wonderful statement. And law enforcement, we like to hear that. I guess that we're appreciated, but it's not about us. It's about this family.
How do you guide a family that lost a loved one through the process, right? First, you have to alert them to the fact that these human remains were discovered, but now they have to go through the next phase, right? They have to go through, aside from just their grief and trying to make sense of all this, now they have to go through the legal process. And if Mr. Groom decides to move forward and he decides to fight this and he decides to take this to trial, that can be a very difficult emotional journey. What role does law enforcement play in communicating to the family and being there for the family?
Whatever you have to do. I mean, it's not just you're done with it, we got him charged, you wash your hand to it. You're part of that entire process up until the prosecution of the case and then the disposition of the case. You're part of it. And I don't know any good homicide investigator who isn't, and I don't want to say emotionally involved, but at least interested in what happens with the family going through this. We know what happens through a trial. 99% of the people, fortunately, don't have to go through it. And what happens leading up to the trial, the various motions. They listen to what the complaint was today in court. So they listen to what the basis they used for the charges were. So you have to get the elements of all of your charges. So they heard that. If this goes to trial and further, they're going to see photographs like you spoke of. And then there's going to be testimony from medical examiners and investigators and what they saw. And that's brutal. And people and families, and you talk about closure, I'm not sure what that means. It's not going to get easy for this family. It might get easier, but it'll never be easy. And as law enforcement officials, if you're worth your salt as an investigator, you're going to help the family get through this process.
Will Svilar, thank you so much for taking the time. Really difficult update, really difficult case, but really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anytime. All
right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.